Good morning and welcome to the Daily AI Show. On today's show, which industries and which companies are having their business models disrupted by AI-powered entrants in their markets? It's not easy to change your business model while running your business. What if your long-standing business saw revenue decline by 25% year over year? That erases profit and viability. That's what we'll be discussing today, with examples across the industries already being disrupted. And it's Tuesday, March 25th. And today I'm joined with, or by, Jyunmi Hatcher and Beth Lyons. Good morning and great to have you here. So let's get to it. I'm thinking that, most people worry about losing their own job inside their own, not a company they own, but while they're an employee at a company through AI automation of some sort. But I'm thinking about, those employees needing to think more carefully about whether the company they're in, its design, its business model, its product market fit, and its operation are disadvantaged compared to new AI first alternatives that jump into their market. That can be a bigger risk to a larger number of people in your company than just the possibility of removing one or two headcount. Because, hey, when you remove a few headcounts due to automation, that can actually improve the profitability of a company. But we're seeing examples now, which we'll share today, of companies whose model just doesn't work anymore when there's AI working out there, and the whole company is going to fail. So I'll turn it over to you, Beth. Jyunmi, you want to lead us off with some thoughts on this subject?
Yeah, so one of the things that I was thinking is the idea that the business, like we look at this from the business standpoint, right? So you have a business, it's based on this data, you are creating content, the content meets people's needs. We can talk about that relationship, but it's about the needs, right? It is literally a living relationship. The product market fit is literally a living relationship. It's not a permanent relationship. And if something comes around that, even if it's your content, feeds that content in a way that better meets your user needs, that's important information for you, right? Like it's a little Ouroboros, it's a little snake eating its tail, right? Like if you are dependent on the information that websites provide, there maybe is something of a symbiotic relationship there, but it's important for the business to understand that it's always really about meeting the user needs. And if like WebMD is one of the examples of the businesses that is having their data taken away, or having their traffic taken away, having their users. They still get what, 2 million, 9 million a month. It's not like dying today, but it is literally, people have medical questions and they want personalized answers because medicine is very personal, as is health, of course. And an individual chat discussion is just better at that if they feel like they can trust the data. And that is about the user need.
Indeed. And I think that's a great example because a specialized collection of information has a hard time defending itself against a universal collection of information that's scraped everything on the web, including your website, WebMD, and now makes it available through a chat interface that's easy to dialogue.
Well, maybe, right? It depends what information you're using for that. It is actually what's happening, Andy. And yes, you're making a great point. But WebMD should actually have tons of information about the kinds of conversations that their users want to have based on what they're searching. that they have access to. And I'm not sure that that's information that the AI could hoover up. AI is really intuitive. It's the wrong word to talk about AI, but the AI is pattern-based, and that functions like intuition sometimes. So it may be able to infer the most likely responses, but WebMD should have the actual data.
Yeah, the word that comes to mind for me is disintermediate. So if before, if you had a medical condition, you would go to Google and you'd search for it, and the first three things that come up are WebMD and health something or other and so on. You know, you then would click on one of those links and go to one of these authoritative, according to the PageRank algorithm, go to one of these authoritative sites on that subject. But now you can shortcut that, and the interactions with Perplexity or ChatGPT or others are bringing the information, the final information that you need, beautifully packaged without you having to go through those steps. So that's the disintermediation that's happening, that is actually having a material and visible impact on the number of, let's call them searches or interaction sessions that are happening on WebMD.
Right. And you can do follow-ups in a chat, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, based on what you just said, I have this other thing that I did not search yet. Is that related? Right? So it's literally a back and forth. I mean, we to a certain extent, Jyunmi, I'm curious what you think about this, because to a certain extent, it feels like the difference from being able, but I'm having like what, 26 volumes, 25 volumes of encyclopedias on a bookshelf to find information, and then being able to Google it, right? Like no contest that I'm not looking at encyclopedias anymore, and I'm definitely Googling the information. This feels similar.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's improved indexing, right? That's essentially what Google offered us with the internet in the first place. You know, when the rise of the internet was coming, the potential could be seen, and more and more people could hop on. This is why narrow internet like AOL thrived in the early days, because nobody knew how to connect and access information and things like that. And what AOL did was it collected often available or often used sources of information. It indexed them. Then stuff like Lycos, Netscape, and eventually Google came out, where it started indexing everything. And then you didn't need to be in that little CompuServe AOL space. You could have access to everything. And that's what really appealed to people, is just having access to all the information and look up anything that they want and find out what, insights into whatever they're looking at.
Yeah, so that's information. And that's one of the spaces that obviously is challenged by the advent of AI. But there are other industries that aren't really about information dissemination or retrieval that are also being challenged. And I want to throw in one just as a counterexample to the information space. And that is traditional banks are losing market share now to agile, so-called fintech startups that leverage AI for credit assessment, for fraud detection, and personalized financial services. So you don't walk into the bank and sit down with a banker now. Peer-to-peer lending platforms can get you a loan. Companies like Lending Club and Upstart utilize AI to do faster credit checks and to assess, evaluate your credit worthiness and more accurately than the traditional methods would, by just looking up your credit scores, for example. So that's happening. And then, like in international banking transfers, Wise is a new platform, relatively new. It used to be called TransferWise, that allows you to send money from your bank to any bank almost anywhere in the world, like without all the transfer fees and so on. It does take a little clip of it as well, but that's disrupted the international money transfer market. Remember Western Union? Well, Western Union may have a distribution advantage for a while because they happen in certain, convenience stores to have a terminal there. But now anybody with a smartphone can do a Wise transaction direct bank to bank. And that's a major impact on Western Union. I doubt that Western Union will survive, if it is even viable today. I haven't seen it yet.
Well, but Western Union ends with cash, right? At least that's my assumption. I admit I have not used Western Union, maybe ever, but certainly not in recent memory. Maybe it ends with a card now, right? Like a prepaid something.
Yeah.
In which case it would stay digital.
And then now the combination of a digital only bank, which is AI powered, right? Plus these AI driven international transfers and ATMs. Like now I'm a part of a digital bank, but I have an ATM card and I can pull stuff out of my digital bank directly from an ATM. That gets me to cash. So you can see how, ATMs changed the game, but largely for the benefit of the banks themselves, by creating efficiencies, by not having to require as many live human tellers to operate the transaction, interface with humans. So everybody kind of shifted over to ATMs, but now digital is moving it to the phone, right?
Right.
And it's, again, disintermediating the traditional banks. Now, large banks may have a play there, but smaller local banks, credit unions, et cetera, they're going to be under pressure over time. It may not happen immediately, but they'll be under pressure because of the sort of further digitization of banking transactions.
Right. And this points to the sort of tension that we talked about before for a new agile small company is able to move faster than the large Titanic company, and in part because the large Titanic company has to figure its business model. And its business model right now involves a bunch of people, and those fees pay for people's jobs, right? So either those business models do big slashing to make themselves agile, and again, like that's not necessarily their strong suit, right?
Yeah.
Their strong suit was like, hey, it's a one-stop shop, like whatever that is. I think we're going to see that play out over and over again. And one of the things that I think is important for businesses is to, again, come back to what is the need that you are meeting and what is the friction that your users experience, because that's the opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. So are you Microsoft? Are you Salesforce? Are you an industry that is embedded but is routinely sort of talked about like, why is it like this? That is a friction place. That is an invitation for something to come and take that business model.
Yeah. One of the things that
I like the idea of this is an opportunity, since we can see these trends, and later maybe Beth, we can show what the article that we're kind of getting inspiration from. But I think this is a great opportunity for, like you were mentioning, is like what if you're losing that product market fit, if you're losing, you can see the trend and you're losing the traffic, and we've already identified several different types of business models and industries that this is affecting this quickly. If you're in that position, I think this is an opportunity for these companies to do the pivot. It is to be agile. It is to make that change. And this can manifest in multiple different ways, but take Netflix, for example, right? It originally started as DVD rental that would be mailed to your house, and then you mail it back, right? And people were perfectly fine for that. And then streaming, online, people spending more time on the internet, consuming more material on the internet, things like that. And they saw a trend towards that's how people are getting content, right? And they're specifically in that specific content game. So they made a transition to offer streaming. And then they did it side by side for a while, right? So it was looked as a value add as opposed to a complete pivot. And then eventually, when people just wanted to have the instant access of streaming from every single device that they could possibly own, right, they no longer needed the DVD. And so that part of the business went away. And so this is kind of one of those opportunities, right? If you're a Chegg, if you're a WebMD, or any of these others examples, then this is that opportunity to move around, because it really does hit on multiple levels. I really like, Andy, your opening question about how employees or people should take a look at who they're working for in terms of what is that business plan, or what is their product, what is their market that they live in, because that I agree, that is something that I don't think a lot of people look at when either one, choosing an employer, or two, seeing what the future trend is going to be. And so I think that's for the employees and for the regular folks. I think that's a key component for them. And so businesses need to look at this as a whole, because that's a different kind of pressure. That's an internal pressure. It's like, oh, we collectively recognize that this is a thing. You need to do something about it. If you don't do it within X amount of months, then we're just gonna try to move over to who has. So I think there's enough pressures from multiple aspects for companies to take advantage of this position and the ability to make the change now.
Yeah, let's talk about the example of Chegg. I want to talk about it because I was very impressed when Dan Rosenzweig, who was previously the CEO of Yahoo for a period of time, he came up with the idea of Chegg, and Chegg was a big disruptor in the textbook market. So he built Chegg as a platform to rent textbooks to students. So they would rent the textbook and they'd turn it back into Chegg, and Chegg would, process those books. Think of it as like the Amazon of textbooks, but on a rental basis. And then later, because they were involved in and hugely involved, it's a very large company, hugely involved. Oh, by the way, just a little side note. While he was the CEO of Yahoo, I left Excite and I interviewed with him. And we were talking about me coming on as an executive to lead their search division. I didn't get that job. I didn't really have the technical chops for it. But so I've actually met this fellow that we're talking about many, many years ago. Like in the year 2000 or so, in that area. Anyway, Dan Rosenzweig had a brilliant idea, did the rental market, and they were involved in the very profitable business of renting very expensive textbooks, like not as much as a car rental, but you still had to pay a lot. And then they got involved in doing online learning to help students. And that became the core of their subscription service, right? So you would subscribe to Chegg and you would have access to all kinds of notes and learning modules around the courses, the specific courses around the textbook. Okay, so it was all lined up beautifully. Well, what happened to Chegg? In 2024 Q4, so just a couple of quarters ago, they reported a 24% drop in their revenues year over year. And why? it was their subscription services that were falling by this huge amount, and the subscriber losses, they declined, down 21% year over year, 23% the next quarter, and they're getting worse and worse. And so stock performance on Chegg, which is a public company, they declined by 99% because investors saw the wall that they were about to hit. And it was very difficult for them to catch up with AI-powered learning facilities. This is really the rise of generative AI in education. And Khan Academy is, like standing up side by side with Chegg, involved with, students in the marketplace. But Khan Academy easily pivoted to Khanmigo, their AI tutor. Chegg didn't have that built into their DNA in some way. And so, they, have run into the brick wall. By the way, Chegg filed a lawsuit against Google alleging that the AI-powered search summaries were diverting traffic away from Chegg's platform. So, if a student is searching for something on Google, they used to find a resource in Chegg, but now the summary of information that's available through the indexed web, if you will, and packaged neatly by AI, by Google, that made it less and less likely that people were going to turn to Chegg and subscribe to their services to get that information. Existential threat. Chegg is like underwater.
Absolutely. And if you look at the Khanmigo example, the Khanmigo example was always slightly more personalized, right? It was gamified learning. It was, you could pick the specific things that you wanted to learn about. So it may have made a little bit more sense moving in that direction to just see this next opportunity for more personalization. Weren't they one of the test cases, early adopters of OpenAI's tech? Maybe it was an early partner. I may be making this up. Sorry. Brian will correct it in Sunday's newsletter if that's true or not. But I do think that Khanmigo was seeing things on individual learner perspectives as opposed to looking at the market as a whole and seeing what you could do to meet those needs, right? And that would make sense because I suspect that Chegg didn't invest in the textbooks that only had 10 people reading them across the board initially. Why would you? That's not the right business model there. Because those are physical things that you have to do, whereas the content that you create, that might ultimately make the list because maybe those 10 people refer people, they're more consistent, they like learning other things, like whatever that is, and it's a digital product. So once it's created, it does not hold warehouse space or like upkeep in the same kind of way, although of course digital content goes stale really quickly as well. Jyunmi, what do you think?
Well, I think in the example of Khanmigo with Khanmigo and with Chegg is, I mean, there seems to be a number of contributing factors. Like Andy said, Khanmigo pivoted and adapted and made Khanmigo, or Khan Academy made Khanmigo. And that was value add for everyone who was going to use their product and things like that. And while I haven't used the Chegg product, but I have perused Khan Academy, and there you can access a fair amount just at a base level. And so it's probably a lot easier. It's probably a lot easier to get into Khan Academy and stick with it when you see these additional value adds. And like you said, more personalized information with Khanmigo and things like that. And so we see an example of the same space that they're living in, subscriber learning tools. And with the advent of AI, here was a pivot to add value to the customer, where we're not seeing that with Chegg. And so I don't know if they attempted to add their own, or they were just a little too late to the to the game or anything like that. But if the suit against Google is saying anything, that's I see that as an indicator of a Hail Mary play kind of thing.
Hey,
I don't know
Jyunmi,
if
let's
yeah,
jump over to something that I know you're very familiar with, and that is music composition and audiovisual content creation. Those
sure.
are industries that had very large, ecosystems of companies that provided those services to a wide range of demand for the creative output of those things. Music for advertisement, music for elevators, music for whatever. And now AI can do the generation as well or better and far cheaper than those studios and or businesses that were doing it before. Do you have any sense about either one of those, either music composition or audio visual content, images and video, and what, from your experience, what that market space looked like and what it's going to be like, and which parts of it are likely to fall by the wayside?
All right. Well, if you got another 30 minutes, we can go through this. So all right. So let's say pre AI, right? Pre mainstream AI. So 2020, pre 2022. Um, Primarily music, music and we'll just say AV in general, right? Audio and video. Uh, we had all kinds of distribution. There was plenty of ways to consume the content. With the rise of the internet, we saw streaming services become far more prevalent, and that was just seen as another distribution method. Some other, of course, there's only so much time, so only so much watch time, and it's the attention goes from one platform to another or one distribution method to another. So we understand this general premise. Now, when it comes to implementation, the big things were you needed people to create all of this content, right? And depending on how commercialized your content was, or how it was going to be monetized, determined how much people that you needed, how much content you needed, things like that. And so that we're talking about television shows, movies, for lack of a better term, we're just calling them television shows, even though you don't necessarily watch them on broadcast TV anymore, right? And then you had mentioned music. So we saw the advent of things like Spotify and all these other methods, but all of those components were essentially, here's a library of stuff that's being created by artists and creatives, and then distributed through whoever their label or whoever's buying the licensing rights, and then licensed to these streaming platforms. And that still follows the same basic model that it's been for a very long time. Why? Because creatives need the money to be able to create the content. And so while those technological changes and distribution methods have changed slightly, that was essentially the model. But what we're seeing now, right, is the ability and the rise of user-generated content. Okay. And so because big creative distribution channels, we're talking about Hollywood, we're talking about SoCal industries, making these really invested, developed content pieces, the the producers or the executives in charge of all those things are looking at a string of, one, attention going away, right? Less people going to theaters, right? So theater releases are being are slowly are dying down, right? Because costs an arm and a leg to go to the theater, especially with a family of 4 and things like that. And with the rise of these streaming services, the content can go from creation to distribution instantaneously, right? And so what these companies are seeing is, hey, we need to only bet on the things we know that are going to make money. So in the last 10 years, what have you seen? Sequels, MCU stuff, anything that can just be, oh, here is an IP, it has an audience, it's going to gain X viewers or X consumers of that content. But that attitude towards creation has been killing it, right? There's less money out there. They're more risk adverse. So people are leaving Hollywood. People are looking at other platforms. People are looking to the user-generated content type platforms like YouTube and,
the example that comes to mind is it's actually a little dated, this example, but a wonderful artist who didn't have all of the trappings that, an agent and, a record contract and all of that would have, provided her. Colby Calais, I don't know if you know that artist, but Colby Calais started out on YouTube. She was just doing, personal recordings of this, but she was so talented that she got a huge following, and that led to a contract. So in effect, a new model of distribution started to emerge, at least in my recollection, where user-generated content put up on social media type platforms is the entree. Once you get an enormous following there, then the industry and the powers that be there will pay attention to you and move you forward. It's almost like, do we really want to spend time with somebody who has 18 followers? No.
Right.
We want influencers who have minimum 50,000 followers in order to associate with them as a company, either for advertising purposes or whatever. Now the proof is in that pudding, right? In that user-generated content sphere. And then you can move forward. And that's changing the game. You don't have to, go, hang out outside the coffee shop where the agents go and see if you can get somebody to sponsor you, in effect, to, produce some kind of visibility for you as an artist.
Right, exactly. And I think that visibility, the followers and things like that, is that new, I'd say that's the emergent way that certain artists can get funding or get backing from the traditional systems. But what I think we're going to be seeing more of is these very creative, very experienced content producers, right? Whether they're coming from television or movies or anything like that, they're going to be moving towards the platforms that are directly to their fans, right? I'm seeing more and more calls to the fan base and using certain platforms or creating new platforms to help get new content created. This is sort of putting in, I guess, a fire or bringing breath back into those peer fundraising organizations. So like Kickstarters and things like that. The concept, not necessarily to those particular platforms, right? Those early days, people just wanted to see new stuff created. But now we're seeing concerted, focused efforts from established creators looking at these funding methods, looking at these other platforms that they didn't used to look at, because the Hollywood process was fairly reliable. Oh, you have some cachet, you've got, you might have the followers, you might have the IP, you might have a director or writer or producer attached to it who's got a good track record. right? So it's a lot about your reputation and name and the things that you've created that help you move on to the next one. And the executives sign the check, and you go through the process and all those kinds of stuff. But now they're not writing checks anymore. So the creators who've lived in this business for decades, need somewhere else to go to. And that's what these new platforms, or these pre-existing platforms like YouTube and things like that, are uh, new angles for their content to be created. And what's interesting enough is that they'll all be categorized as UGC. So if you see these huge numbers in UGC start jumping up, it's going to be lumped into those kinds of things, whereas UGC used to be or is currently identified as, this is the content that someone in social media essentially created, and sometimes hawks a product, or sometimes does X, Y, or Z, and things like that. And we've seen how it can go both ways as well. Take Mr. Beast, for example. He's created an entire empire all from YouTube, and is in a position to where he's now making deals with larger distributions. And notice he's not really working with the big broadcast channels, not NBC or ABC or anything like that, and it's not movie studios like Paramount or anything like that. He did it with Amazon, right? And Amazon's always positioned themselves as, we're a warehouse, right? We've got a ton of money. We'll throw it at you. Sometimes we don't know what we're doing, but we have enough money to just throw at it, and we'll see what happens. So they're less risk averse at putting out more creative or more unique content, because they're not afraid of taking a risk like that. So we can see it go both ways. It really comes down to getting to your fan base, growing your following, and things like that. And we see that in non-creative fields as well, right? The thing that is growing the most in terms of internet content, or content as a whole, is people are finding those authentic experiences or things that they align with, right? Much like our beloved chat and everyone who watches us on a near daily basis. They're joining us for a larger experience that brings them value, right? And as that grows, that is a more sustainable base to, one, communicate quicker, turn around faster, address any potential issues, grow and add more value, because it's this symbiotic relationship, as opposed to just treating it as a more consumer and business kind of relationship. And those are the businesses that are seeing faster and more sustainable growth over the last few years. It's people starting a community, getting 10,000 people to enjoy the content that they like to make. And that's one of those key components. And I think that's what we're really going to see an influx of, as long as people can resonate with with the content makers, with the creatives who have made things that they've liked, and now are directly appealing to them to make more content or make more creative art forms, film, or even non-film kind of things. This allows them to enter into that more symbiotic relationship, and that is just going to shoot up not just the quality, but also the quantity of things that we don't normally get to see as an audience, because this will open up the doors of that creative expression. So it really is cutting the middleman stuff out. And I think Greg might have mentioned this, a while back or earlier in the stream, but AI will cut out the middleman. And that's the hope. The hope is that with AI, you can enable enough of your business to where you can go directly to who you want to speak to. right? Who you want to communicate to, who you want to create for.
So maybe model fit collapse isn't the right framing. Maybe it's model fit clearing, right? So we're removing the things that were there that because they seemed necessary, but when abilities change, when there's a more direct communication vehicle possible, it's no longer needed. And that structure was considered part of the process. But when it's absent in the process, does that create a better experience for people? And I would say, so one of the businesses that is growing, even though people thought that it wouldn't, is Reddit. And Reddit is very experience-based. The other thing that I think is interesting in terms of Reddit is the AI is now there to be able to tell you what's happening on Reddit, right? Like one of the things that I experience on Reddit sometimes is like, wow, this is really interesting. I have no idea. Like I knew what we were talking about in the beginning. Now I don't. I don't know those references. I can go to Perplexity, do a little translate for me, what is happening here, and then now I'm understanding it. So I have sort of an instant translator for me in terms of cultures on the internet that let me consume beyond my personal experience or my existing awareness. I'm able to go further in that context. And that's one of the things that I think is important for businesses moving forward to be aware of. What your people are looking for, what our users are looking for, is an experience of the goal, right? An experience of success, an experience of no longer in pain, an experience of I'm not alone looking at AI and going like, this is going really fast. Is anybody else paying attention to how fast this is going? Like, thank you for joining us for these moments of like, wow, yep, let's talk about that too. But the one caution that I would make in this is that there's a double-edged sword of AI and data, because AI will tell you that the opportunities look closer to what they looked like before, because that's the training data. Those are the models that were successful. And what you have, it's going to be based on the questions that you ask, but what you have is a bunch of data that you're going to need to be innovating within and testing, like, does this work? Does that work? And I'd like to test these ideas. I'd like to test, I don't know. I'd like to test the coffee conversation at 7 a.m. About mushrooms every day. I don't like mushrooms. I don't know why I said it. It's just there. But like, okay, so now I'm collecting data about that, and I can ask AI to give me marketing information. We can do product research. We can do all of those kinds of things. But if I'm not giving the experience that people are looking for when they want to have a 7 a.m. conversation about mushrooms, and you're out there, it's not going to work for me, right? And so it's important to understand how AI is going to interpret your data and to ask those correct questions. I think there's a ton of opportunities. Don't do the mushroom thing. I don't know. Let's not. Why am I talking about mushrooms still?
We're following you, Beth. We're following you. Okay. So in these last few minutes, I want to touch on some of the other industries that are being disrupted. We've talked about banking. We've talked about education. We've talked about AV. Wow. We've talked about AV. We've talked about dog sitting, and then we talked about. We're going to talk about a few more, and I think these are interesting ones. One of them should be pretty obvious. Companies that do translation into multiple languages, whether documents or live broadcasts or whatever. Translators are an area that we doubt is going to be. If you have an idea for a translation company, it better be an AI translation company, because hiring translators around the world to cover the things for the UN. That doesn't seem like it's going to be a good thing. The revenue risk for that particular industry, according to Perplexity, is that 55% of the revenues of the translation industry, which is a real industry out there, are at risk by 2028. So just 3 years from now, half of that business is going to be gone, replaced by AI translation. Advertising and marketing agencies, we haven't really touched on that, but this is an area where automation using AI is replacing traditional agencies, and they're losing clients as brands figure out ways to adapt and use generative AI to develop the content and tools for their marketing campaigns. So an example that was provided in the research that Perplexity provided me on this subject is that Heinz and Nestle, those two major brands, are already using generative AI tools for their advertising content creation by their internal teams, reducing their reliance on external agencies for the development of advertisement. And those traditional agencies that have been providing that are seeing significant revenue losses as clients shift their budgets toward these automated systems. And of course, those agencies are adapting as quickly as they can to incorporate those things. But this brings into question the whole pricing model of those services, because AI is profoundly cheap. And we've had a show and talked about the whole idea of professional services, which is the last one that I want to mention, and whether or not hourly billing models are going to be possible in the future as AI agents and AI assistants become much more capable of providing the professional services already in the coding environments. If you have a DevOps firm that's, doing, product, software development and also, managing the operations for that, the new sort of integrated development environments with AI agents can allow you to build code and launch it and operate it on the internet without ever having to deal with one of the professional services firms that cropped up over the last decades to support the need for software on the internet. That's those professional services organizations, which would charge you by the hour for however long it took them to build that code. Now, the competitor, which is the AI agent, is doing it in seconds rather than hours. So how do you bill on an hourly basis? And, clients increasingly are preferring firms that integrate, advanced AI and analytics into whatever services they offer upfront. Like, even when they develop a proposal as a professional services firm, they're going to provide a lot of value because they were able to generate that using the AI tools that they're incorporating into their practices. But eventually, many of these professional services firms, the kinds of people like to think consultants in general, like consulting firms, if I were graduating from business school today, back when I graduated from business school in 1983, there were two big, money-making opportunities: investment banking and consulting. Think Boston Consulting Group, BCG, Bain Consulting, all those things. Well, those companies still exist. They're using AI at the forefront, and they're actually providing AI transformation services to their clients now. But over time, I don't know that professional services generally or consulting specifically is going to be a top choice for graduating sort of elite business program students. All right. Do you guys have any final thoughts? No. Yes, Beth.
I just think that this is something to be thinking of. Would love to hear from people who are watching this episode. If you are looking at your company or you're looking at the companies that you're engaging with, are you seeing this? Like, when you put this lens on, we'd love to hear what you're seeing. I think SWOT analysis is our friend. That's no longer once we're going to do a 5-year strategic plan. Maybe that's like quarterly and moving to monthly, right?
Great. All right. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget, we'll be back tomorrow with our weekly news wrap up, like all the things that we saw and found interesting from the past week. And we have some shows coming up on Thursday and Friday. Thursday is going to be about vibe coding, using those integrated development environments that are AI assisted. And so we're going to show you some things about that. Karl will be back with us on that day to assist on that. Please go to thedailyAIshow.com and sign up for the newsletter there. It's always worth a read. Sunday mornings, a good way to catch up on and reinforce the learning that you get. If you're one of our regular listeners, you can get a nice compact summary, fun to read, and reinforce all of the learning that we're hopefully providing in our educational model, the Daily AI Show. All right, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Aloha.